What would life be without memories? Without our possessions and ideas? Without our history? What can we learn from the past in order to better shape the future? And why should we study history anyway? History gets to the heart of who we are as a people. It is a cultural memory, and by recording these memories, we ensure that our descendants and the world will never forget who we are and where we have been. We study the past to understand people who may have thought and acted differently than we do. To seek knowledge about ourselves or our immediate family. To make sense of a time radically different from ours, and find a sense of perspective for our own times, and to help us shape a better future. The early founders of the Kentucky Historical Society must have known these basic truths. The future historian should not be driven to interpret the whole character of an age from a few scattered facts, they said, but will find the whole of the record of life, the actions, and the speech of successive generations here deposited and faithfully preserved. Generations later, these words still describe the work of the Society, who strive to document and showcase a state whose diversity and accomplishments neither the founders nor its early pioneers could have imagined. What could a wooden plow from 1790 have in common with a Toyota Camry from 1998? What does a quilt from 1880 have to do with a boy's batting helmet from 1980? Four objects so seemingly unrelated. Yet these and many others like them each tell a piece of the story of Kentucky and Kentuckians. Who are we? What makes us unique? What brings us together? They are all part of a common mosaic and help fulfill a common purpose. Silenced by time, their combined lifespans form but a tiny thread of the unfolding fabric of Kentucky. The Kentucky Historical Society began early in the history of the state as an effort to preserve that fabric. But never did they imagine the growth of the collection or the wide use of its programs and facilities. The Society has evolved to become a portal of preservation and an exploration of time and place. The result is not just a picture of the past, but a living presence and an eye on the future. When you use your computer, you may not think of it as an historical artifact. But 200 years from now, People may find today's PCs as quaint and as fascinating as 21st century citizens find this fro and maul, tools used in the early 1800s to split wood for shingles or barrels, or this old wash tub and wringer. Both were as essential to their times as the computer is to ours. When you take a snapshot, probably don't consider that you're documenting an era. These 19th century daguerreotypes, unique images on silver-coated copper plates, and these photographs of everyday life in Kentucky were originally created just to fill the family photo album. Now we look at them as an historical record of work, of family life, or the fervor and the fashion of places and time. You may think the details of your own life story are of little importance beyond the present. Your great-great-granddaughter may feel differently. The inspiration to preserve the heritage of Kentucky began on January 14, 1834, when a letter written by John Floyd in 1776 was published in a Frankfort paper. The article recounted the capture by Indians and subsequent rescue of Daniel Boone's daughter and her friends in vivid detail. Its publication fired the imagination of Frankfort resident Orlando Brown, his father, U.S. Senator John Brown, and the Nelson County Judge, Congressman John Rowley. Together, the men formed the Kentucky Historical Society. But it took a long time, nearly a century in fact, for the society to assume a major role in Kentucky history. By 1881, the Society's collection filled 2 rooms in the old state capitol in Frankfort. But years of growth would alternate with years of inactivity and uncertainty. Jenny Chin Morton, a Franklin County native and founder of the Frankfort Colonial Daughters, took on Kentucky history as a cause. After her death in 1920, Sarah Jewett Cannon assumed leadership. In order to tell the story of the state, these strong Kentucky women protected and nurtured what had been envisioned by Kentucky men nearly a century before. Miss Morton introduced the regular publication of articles and analysis by historians in a publication called The Register. They also examined documents and letters. A bust of Henry Clay by Joel T. Hart accompanied a portrait of Thomas Todd by Matthew Harris Jewett. Later, other portraits of the noteworthy were gathered, and the Hall of Governors was created to include a Matthew Jewett portrait of Isaac Shelby. As the 20th century progressed, moving pictures joined still photography. Recorded oral history joined journals and letters. The static exhibit gave way to interactive experiences and captivating hands-on activities for children. Because we all learn in different ways, the Society's Museum Education Department seeks a variety of approaches to present information on Kentucky. To help illustrate the point, the Society has added museum theater to their portfolio of services. A letter or diary might give insight for the dialogue, while a portrait might lend design components for the costumes. Sometimes recordings of actual voices from the past might expand the story or demonstrate a particular style of writing or dialect that can be used in the play. Drawing from over 8,000 oral history interviews, a whole new dimension to the pursuit of history is discovered. In fact, grants from the Society are awarded yearly to Kentuckians with special interest in conducting interviews in their community. If you ever wanted to hear what a Kentucky soldier who served in World War I has to say, you might find yourself listening to his actual voice rather than reading a letter or diary. If every Kentuckian has the potential to add to Kentucky's story, it's important to raise awareness of history, starting at a young age. Every year, students from hundreds of schools across the Commonwealth encounter history through a society exhibit or program. For a student whose only previous encounters with history have been the dry accounts of history text or the dramatized excitement of TV and the movies, here's a chance to get an idea of what the past was really like. Many teachers take advantage of the opportunity to make curriculum and current event connections, so students often arrive with a scavenger hunt or writing assignment in hand. Then it's time to explore and discover clues to the past. They ask questions of museum staff and show off their own knowledge and ideas. Student visitors are encouraged to compare how things change over time and to put the past into an everyday perspective. If you were moving to a new home and could take 5 things, what would you bring? The display panel atop an exhibit's wooden barrel reads. Students lift the lid of a barrel and look inside. To their surprise, they discover a German China service brought to Kentucky in 1801 through the Cumberland Gap, and a silver watch made in the late 1700s from London, England. Around every corner is a mystery to unravel, an event or place to discover, a personality to meet or to see in a new light, and something to think about after the visit is complete. Imagine the delight of a student from Springfield, Kentucky, when he learns that Abraham Lincoln may have walked near his home, that Daniel Boone preferred a wide-brimmed hat instead of the famous coonskin cap so often depicted in television and early biographies. For Kentucky's youth, the Kentucky Historical Society exhibitions are often the first encounter with in-depth information and insight into their home state. It may be their first exposure to a museum, their first introduction to art, architecture, and other art forms, their first opportunity to express their own ideas about the past through writing or drawing. It challenges them to think about their own potential and how they might change the present and the future. Back in the classroom, students read aloud essays and short stories they've created based on their experience. History now has a face. Sometimes it's the one in the mirror. What is history anyway? For some, history is a journey through the events and personalities that have shaped a nation or a society or culture. For others, history is not only public, it's personal and close to home. History is the recording of great public events, but it's also the story of the record and rewards of everyday life and of everyday people. History captures famous faces, but nameless faces also have much to convey across time. Who are these people, and what do they tell us? And why were these photographs taken? What did the photographer want us to know? In them, we can search for meaning, for clarity, for understanding, for direction. Through them, they preserve what might otherwise be lost to time. Look closely at the work of the Kentucky Historical Society, and you'll see that history takes many forms, and so does experiencing it. Our most important artifact is the old state capitol, says one society staff member. It is always on display. Who made these silver vessels, and how were they used? Who sat in this wheelchair from the 1930s? Who wore this uniform, and what does it represent? And why were these items saved? The tankard belonged to Porter Clay. The baptismal bowl came from the Hardin family. Both are rare examples of the work of Lexington silversmith Asa Blanchard. The uniform represents the Frontier Nursing Service, which provided midwifery and nursing care to thousands of people in the mountains of southeastern Kentucky in the 1920s. With the passage of time, even the mundane can become mysterious. Artifacts sometimes remind us how the familiar has changed, and in some cases, it presents us with things we've never seen before. Would you recognize this bizarre-looking implement? You'd need a map to know it is a map maker. These games were once a source of fun. Now they just look funny to us. Suppose you wanted to know more. Suppose you saw something while touring an exhibit that aroused your curiosity. If the item was related to a war, you could look for more information at the Military History Museum. Here, you would find items specifically related to state military history. If a rare engraving or ambrotype caught your eye, you might visit special collections to seek out other one-of-a-kind items. Interested in maps? You might ask to see the 1784 Kentucky map by John Filson, or the 1818 Luke Munsell map, which was commissioned by the state of Kentucky and measures 7.5 feet wide. This map is full of early details of Kentucky. Notice the mills and roads and other geographical features. Figuring out the past is a lifelong journey. The more we look, the more facets we discover. Kentuckians' moods, experiences, and opinions have always been diverse, and this Miller family Proctor is a good example. Dating from 1782, the Proctor, an ornately decorated family record, was primarily produced by German-speaking settlers. Rare even in Pennsylvania, where they were mostly created, they are almost non-existent in Kentucky. Because the Kentucky Historical Society strives to reach all Kentuckians, its staff believes it's important to present materials in many different ways. So history is told through objects and visuals. History is told through documentary programs specifically tailored for the television viewing audience. History is ongoing and can offer much-needed direction to current issues facing our state and our nation's leaders. At the heart of the Society are activities to collect, catalog, and preserve artifacts and documents and information that offer insight into Kentucky life. It's a vast and ever-growing collection. In fact, at any given time, only a portion of the Society's collection is on public display. Did you ever wonder why museums were so dark? Though essential for so many life processes, light is destructive to historic objects. Displaying items to the public and making rare and one-of-a-kind resources available to researchers must be balanced with the desire to preserve. Some documents and photographs are so fragile that reproductions rather than originals are shown to visitors. High-quality prints and copies allow access to materials while preserving the originals. preventing primary source material from being lost forever due to too much handling or viewing. In copying materials, many precautions are taken, and a variety of options for capturing images are used. Both state-of-the-art equipment and tried-and-true methods ensure the survival of precious items. Maps and other large manuscripts are filmed using an 8x10 view camera. Other methods may work well for copying books, three-dimensional objects, or other types of originals. Once an image is photographed, it can be scanned for use in many applications throughout the society. If the item is significant and extremely fragile or at risk of fading or decaying, the original is copied, then literally placed in a freezer for long-term preservation. This image of the Cumberland Gap under Union occupation in 1862 reveals many small details of fortifications, wagons, and residential headquarters. If handled frequently and exposed to light, many of these minute details would gradually disappear. The same is true for rare books and maps, manuscripts and letters, flags, and other rare and fragile textiles. That's why museum staff rotate items from storage to the exhibition area. How do you decide what is important? What should be saved and what should be displayed? These are questions that reflect the nature of history itself, questions that Kentuckians across the state help the Society answer. From its earliest days, many of the Historical Society's holdings have been donated by individuals and families. Over the decades, thousands of artifacts and documents have come to the Society through donations. The portraits of the Tsar and Tsarina were donated by Ambassador Cassius Clay after his diplomatic appointment to Russia. Some of the most visible aspects of the Kentucky Historical Society's efforts are found on the road, where history is recorded on the corners and along roads and highways. From the famous sites such as Keeneland Racecourse in Lexington to fascinating footnotes of local history, Kentucky highway markers mark the spots where history happened. From public records to unique resources like journals, diaries, letters, newspaper clippings, and records of conversations with Kentucky frontiersmen, the Historical Society Research Library has helped fill out many a family tree. For all who choose to look, Kentucky's story can be seen in photographs and maps and diaries. It can be a silent voice from the past reawakened. For all who listen, Kentucky's story can be heard through documented traditions that are deeply rooted in our history, our experiences, and our shared common bond. In song, music, and dance, as a scratchy record or early recording of a taped interview, through the quiet eloquence of the printed page, to the living voice of an actor dedicated to putting the past in the spotlight. For all who seek it, Kentucky's story can be found in public records and private accounts, in hand-colored prints from another time. A diary entry penned by hand, a link on the internet. For those who appreciate it, Kentucky's history can teach and guide, help us learn from our mistakes, and work towards a better future. One suspects if Daniel Boone, Jenny Chin Morton, and the early founders of the Society were to walk the campus of the Historical Society, they could see what their dreams had become. They would see gala events celebrating our Kentucky heritage. They'd see Society staff in outreach programs assisting other museums, helping them with preservation issues and staff training. They would see junior historians in leadership roles being nurtured and trained in order to help them develop a greater understanding and appreciation of their history. They'd see the old state capitol still standing, still delighting all who come. They'd see a modern facility dedicated to their story. But as grand and exciting as the Kentucky History Center is, the real story of Kentucky is in the counties and towns that make up the Commonwealth. For all Kentuckians, Kentucky's story continues and will continue for all time at the Kentucky Historical Society. What would life be without memories? Without our history? What can we learn from the past in order to better shape the future? And why should we study history anyway? History gets to the heart of who we are as a people. It is a cultural memory, and by recording these memories, we ensure that our descendants and the world will never forget who we are and where we have been. We study the past to understand people who may have thought and acted differently than we do, and to help us shape a better future. The Kentucky Historical Society is a portal of preservation and an exploration of time and place. It is not just a picture of the past, but a living presence and an eye on the future.